Live from New York, it's theCUBE. Covering Big Data New York City 2016. Brought to you by headline sponsors, Cisco, IBM, NVIDIA, and our ecosystem sponsors. Now, here are your hosts, Dave Vellante and Peter Burris.
New York City, everybody. This is theCUBE, the worldwide leader in live tech coverage, and we're here at BigDataNYC, hashtag BigDataNYC, and we run BigDataNYC concurrent with Strata and Hadoop, what used to be Hadoop World and combined to be Strata Hadoop just down the street at the Javits Center. This is the 7th year of theCUBE covering what was Hadoop World. It was one of our first shows in 2010. And as I say, it's evolved into Strata. Interestingly, Hadoop is no longer the shiny new toy. We're going to talk about that. We have a panel of our experts here. Let me introduce them now. Peter Burris is Chief Research Officer of SiliconANGLE Media and has been leading up a lot of the work that we're doing in data, capital, and data value. Jeff Frick is here, he's the General Manager of theCUBE. Jeff has been running just an awesome program this week and throughout the year, and of course we're joined by George Gilbert, who's the lead big data analyst at Wikibon. Gentlemen, good to see you again.
Good, David.
Good night last night, Jeff. We had NVIDIA was our co-host of an event, a party. Peter Burris was the host of that party. And we were talking about deep learning and AI, and give us a little update on what that event was about.
It's just interesting how this continues to evolve. We were just talking about what is the hashtag. It's still Strata Hadoop. The Hadoop is kind of going down in terms of importance, but there's this whole new thing with machine learning and artificial intelligence and driven by autonomous cars and all these new things. So again, this new wave of innovation, new wave of opportunity. A ton of the people on the panel last night had left some of the leaders in the Hadoop space, if you will, to start new companies around new opportunities in real time and advanced analytics. So it's great.
It's the Silicon Valley way, right? On to the next big thing. Now, of course, George, you also hosted a panel last night, and we had a packed house. There were probably 150, 160 people here. They stayed, through the content. In fact, many of them left after the content presentation, and the DJ started going, and the beer started. Maybe they just wanted to see.
We had to kick them out.
Maybe they just wanted to see the debate, and then plenty of people stayed. But so, George, what are the big themes that we should be looking for here at Strata Hadoop this year?
Well, there's some that sort of continue on from the last couple shows that we've done, where Hadoop was our shiny new toy for a couple of years. But it turned out that, as Peter has articulated really well, there's a skill set involved in putting all the pieces together. We sort of broke apart what it used to take an integrated product like a DBMS to do all these advanced analytics. And we took out the pieces so you could do a mix and match assembly and get essentially a pipeline of analytics that was just right for you. And the unintended side effect was sort of a lot of complexity. That worked for the Googles, the LinkedIns, the Twitters, the Ubers, the Airbnbs. The rest of the mainstream, they're still struggling to get their data lakes to be productive, and the value of the data lake really was lower cost of ownership, like per terabyte, than a data warehouse. I will say, I think the shiny new toy that we're going to hear about a lot in this show is machine learning, but again, there's a huge amount of challenges to make that mature.
So Peter, the return on investment in this space has been, what Abhi Mehta jokes is reduction in investment. They've lowered the denominator as a way to get ROI. Okay, I'm going to put everything in the data lake and it's going to be cheaper to store it. Is there hope for this space in terms of extracting more value? Is there a data value play that is on the horizon, perhaps with machine learning and some of these other technologies that we're talking about? Or is it more of a business process and human capital issue?
Well, so you're asking a couple questions there, Dave. The first question you're asking, in many respects, is do these technologies make the whole concept of data value clearer? And I think that's the first thing, is that what companies are really trying to do with big data technologies is liberate the value of data, figure ways of translating data into value in new ways, often because it allows them to understand the characteristics of the problems anew. What The big data community is challenged to do, however, is to stop just chasing the new tool and instead start focusing on how these tools come together to actually solve real problems. So I think we're going to what George has said, we're going to see two things happen. We're going to see people talking about the new tool because they are trained and that's their habit, is to keep chasing new tools. And then we're going to talk about other people who are saying, we've seen failures, we've seen lack of adoption, we've seen abandonment, but here's new ways of thinking about how these things come together in simpler, more straightforward combinations to actually solve these complex problems. The real objective, look, this stuff is going to be some of the most important stuff that's ever come out of the computing industry. The whole concept of big data is incredibly important, and it's going to have long-lasting effects on not just this industry, but all industries. That's pretty obvious. The process of getting there is turning out to be a hell of a lot more painful than I think anybody thought it would be when we first started. And that has to become a theme of the show as well. How can we start doing this in a more simpler, disciplined way that more likely leads to predictable value?
And part of that challenge has been the complexity within the ecosystem. You guys have written about that a lot. Last year, just exactly a year ago, we talked about there were cracks in that Hadoop armor. We said the nose of the plane is pointing up, but a lot of companies are losing altitude, and when the funding dries up, uh-oh, look out. And so we started to see some of that happen. There's been some consolidation, although Talon just is going public, so there's maybe some bright spots. What's your take on what's happening in the market, George, in the ecosystem? Give us the summary there.
Well, for many years, it's sort of digression, but an analogy. For many years, Amazon was funded with, or I should say their valuation was extremely high with marginal productivity. And that gave them a cost of capital that was essentially zero. And that's what allowed them to build out these, this huge network of distribution centers. We were in a similar situation with many big data companies. They could grow their infrastructure in terms of their employee base, their skills, their distribution channels, where with private funding, they got very, very high valuations. That changed towards the end of last year and the beginning of this year. And so where the assumption was, hey, we're going, our standard bearers are the Hadoop distro vendors, and then there's this satellite vendors like a Talon and others that help sort of bring data in or do advanced analytics. That's not taken for granted anymore, and we're seeing people who got stuck, mainstream companies who got stuck trying to get value out of these, I should say, either out of Hadoop projects or more broadly big data. They're looking to say, well, maybe the answer isn't just open source so that I have freedom. Maybe the answer is simplicity, even if it means a little more lock-in. And that's what Peter was referring to. Hey, maybe we'll take something that sort of comes all pre-integrated, and has some standard interfaces, let's say like an Iguaz, which we'll hear about more later this week, which is basically Exadata for big data.
Well, wasn't that MapR's play with the original,
yes,
Hadoop distro?
And they are an example.
And how's it working? I mean, it's hard to tell what's happening with Cloudera. They got a boatload of money from Intel, and they seem to be doing okay, but suspect they're burning a lot of cash. We know what the story is at Hortonworks. They announced another raise in last December, worst time in the world.
Right.
You could do that, but they had to do it. And MapR, I don't know, a private company, hard to tell. You've seen some M&A. Pentaho got taken out by Hitachi, but then again, Datamir's getting funding. So it seems like there's rip currents in all directions.
There's still a lot of VC capital sloshing around. We go through these different phases, where sometimes there's an excess of capital chasing, not as many really high quality deals. Sometimes you don't have enough skilled people for these companies to hire. Right now we're still in the excess capital sort of overhang, but I think customers are starting to vote with their pocketbooks and say, look, it doesn't have to be open source. The big companies, we're okay with that.
So what about the customer angle here? I mean, companies are they're struggling still with a data strategy, right?
Well, let's put it this way, Dave, that this has been a marketplace So this is my second Hadoop-oriented Cube gig. And so I haven't done the previous 7 that you guys have done, but I'll venture an opinion that for most of those previous 7, the talk was the chasing of new and cool tools. This is an ecosystem that has been chasing tools and hoping that those tools would ultimately lead to finding outcomes. What users are starting to do now increasingly is focus on the outcomes. They're chasing the outcomes. That's what they want. And whatever set of tools is available, they're starting to use. So while the ecosystem continues to chase tools, and machine learning is an example of that, that's the habitual behavior of this marketplace. Customers are now stepping back and saying, I have been chasing tools, it hasn't generated the returns and results that I want, I now have to focus my time and attention on the outcomes, the capabilities required to get to those outcomes, and I'm going to start working more closely with suppliers and vendors that are capable of complementing my skills and my capabilities so that I can achieve the outcomes that I want. The marketplace, in my opinion, in our opinion, is about to go through something of a not consequential shift. It's going to be subtle. I think it's going to start happening at this show, in the conversations we have at this table. A focus on outcomes where tools are or are not achieving those outcomes, and a reduction in the focus on tools per se.
Yeah, you're right, it's a good observation, even though you weren't here. It was kind of, what is it? How can I get it to work? How can I get value out of it? Oh, well, I guess I can reduce the expense of my data warehouse. Yeah, but it's still not living up to the promises of a 365-degree view of the customer. Oh, we'll bring in Spark and we'll make it real time. Okay, well, how do I get value out of that? And it's just like this never-ending tail chasing to find value.
You know, the real innovation I think that we might start witnessing at this show is, it's not the product side, it's the go-to-market side. You know, we're pretty close with what IBM keeps, evolving in terms of their go-to-market. It's not about sort of putting up a console with 27 different, services. It's training 2,000 global business consultants on how to build solutions out of their components, and then even in the bigger group, the industry solutions group, where they've built semi-custom apps. Those are outcomes, and I suspect over the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to be seeing more and more of companies like that, and I think we'll start to see the Azures and the Amazons of the world try and get a little closer to
Well, and IBM's making money in big data because they are focused on the outcomes. And speaking of IBM, we have an event with IBM tonight, I guess this afternoon. We got a bunch of IBM action going on.
That's
and then
right.
Tonight we're co-hosting a party with IBM. I love this co-hosting a party,
That's
Jeff,
right.
with theCUBE, it's working.
One party was just not enough, Dave. We had another one. So tonight, the second half of the day is really this IBM signature event where they've got a lot of speakers talking about, again, the solutions play, and then they've got a party across the street at the other Mercantile Annex on 36th. Make sure I get my streets right. That starts at 7 p. So that will be there. They'll have a whole nother series of talks and panels. We'll be carrying it live on theCUBE, so keep an eye if you can't make it. At siliconangle.tv, you'll catch it all there, and of course we'll have it all up on demand.
Yeah, and we're here at 37 Pillars, which is on 37th Street. It's 517, I think.
517.
37th Street, so stop by West 37th, obviously. Just for John Furrier, it's a driver from Javits. For me, it's 3 or 4 drivers, but stop by and see us. You're watching theCUBE, we're live from New York City. We'll be right back.
Why wait for the